For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Shotgun Spratling for instant analysis of USC's Wednesday press conference. Now, after Tuesday's newsy press conference with head coach Clay Helton, we got to change the pace. We got to talk to wide receivers coach Keary Colbert and defensive line coach Vic So'oto, two position coaches we haven't really talked to so far this season. So we got to talk about more football today. Shotgun, starting with Vic So'oto, we got to talk about Marlon Tuipulotu. Obviously, he's had such a great season. We got to ask him about what's the difference so far with him, and what did Vic really do to get that performance out of him so far this season?
Yeah, a great 3 games of a season, midway through this season. So, but Marlon's been fantastic all 3 games, and he's really stood out on film watching him. And so, it's kind of asked, what's been different for him from last year? Obviously, Vic So'oto wasn't here, but he's watched some of the tape. And they said that maybe his role is a little bit different this year. He's been asked not necessarily to eat blocks in this defense. The nose tackle's not sitting there and just kind of taking up a couple blocks and allowing someone else to go make a play. They want Marlon to be violent in the run and go make plays himself. They're asking him to play with more of an anger, and he's turning the splash plays into his routine plays. So he's making plays, getting in the backfield, and it's becoming routine, and that's how he's gaining some notoriety and how people are picking up a little bit more on him. He's just been fantastic using his hands. And Vic So'oto said that one of the things that stood out is his love for the game. How's he really noticed that? It's because of the type of questions he's been asking in the meeting rooms, and talks about, he's talking about offensive coordinators, not just, hey, what do I need to do on this play? What's my assignment? It's, what's this offensive coordinator do? What does he like to do? I've noticed this thing watching tape that they do specifically in the third quarter. How is that something you've noticed as well? Those specific type of questions are something that Vic So'oto says shows his love for the game. And I think that one of the things that's unique is, he's got this relationship with his younger brother, Tuli, who's on the team. And I think that's driving both of those guys. And I think that him kind of leaning on his younger brother is pushing Marlon to be better too. And I think it's really showing on the field that he's really taken a step forward in his game.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, Shotgun, Marlon wasn't the only Tuipulotu to be mentioned in the presser. We talked about Tuipulotu. And Vic So'oto seems like he's very much a practice guy. If you perform in practice, you'll see some playing time on Saturday. And he kind of alluded to that. Tuli was put into different situations during training camp and so far this practice season. And it seems like he's been doing well in practice, gaining notoriety with the 2s and then now the 1s as well.
Yeah, I mean, Vic So'oto said about Tuipulotu, he just runs. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Everywhere he goes, he's going as hard as he can at all times. He's just 100 miles an hour at all times, and that's what Vic So'oto is looking for from guys in practice. And he says if you do that in practice, it'll translate to the games. He said he didn't know a lot about Tuli coming in. He's a freshman that's supposed to be coming in. But then when he got on the practice field, he started showing up every day. And that's what, has really impressed Vic So'oto. That's the thing that he looks for. He says if you take care of stuff in practice, what you do on Tuesday in the inside run period matters just as much, as what you do on Saturdays if you want to play. Leading into the game is what you do in practice earns that playing time. And then you got to go show yourself out on Saturdays as well. And he said Tuipulotu, that's something that he's done. He showed out in practice, and then he got a couple snaps the first game and looked good doing that. And he's just added more and more reps as the season has progressed.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting too, Shotgun. We were asking about Nick Figueroa, someone who maybe is not the flashy guy like Marlon, but Vic said that he's the most sure guy on the defensive line, Nick Figueroa. I thought that was interesting that he said you could really move him around.
Yeah, Vic said that he's another guy that just does his job. He shows up at practice and he goes and performs. And, every day is the same thing. He's very consistent in what he does. He doesn't complain, doesn't say anything. He just, he takes the coaching and then goes forward and puts it forward. And that's one of the interesting things he said, and I thought this was interesting just for the entire defensive line, is that Vic So'oto said there's no decoys. USC, Todd Orlando is bringing a lot of blitzes and a lot of pressures. It's not, hey, we need you to run this way to take this other guy out of the play so we can open up space. No, everyone has an opportunity to go get the quarterback. And he said Nick Figueroa is a guy that's really been a guy to take advantage of that. Pressures to me are just missed sacks, is what Vic So'oto said, which I thought was very interesting because pressures often can be played up. It's kind of a little bit newer stat, but yeah, you're getting to the quarterback and you're causing him to get off his spot, but are you pulling him down? Are you getting those negative yardage? That's what Vic So'oto wants. And he says Nick Figueroa has been one of the guys that's been most consistent in that, being able to get to the quarterback and hit the quarterback more than just kind of moving the quarterback around a little bit. So he's another guy that worked his way up the depth chart this season, and what he did in practice. And again, it goes back to, if you aren't practicing well, you're not going to play. That's the whole thing with Vic So'oto. So he said, if you want to play, show up on Tuesday when we do inside run. Show up on Wednesday when we do inside run. And guys like Nick Figueroa have done that throughout this fall camp. And that's what impresses, especially when you have a new position coach. You got to show up and practice and do it. And those guys have done it so far, Nick Figueroa and both the Tuipulotus.
Mm-hmm. Overall, Shotgun, I think you and I agree that So'oto has elevated this defensive line group. When he was asked about that, and specifically in relation to Jay Tufele, like, how do you move on from that? And he was like, I wasn't here when he was there, so I just had my guys. And I think he talked about the buy-in and how there was just a hunger from the defensive line group to get better. How do you think that's impacted Vic So'oto's maybe ability to get the most out of these guys when it seems like he's really elevated them so far this season?
I mean, he's struck a chord with them, by talking about practice and forcing them to, be their own group. He said that they've stepped up and kind of formed their own identity. He said, with Jay Tufele was here when Vic So'oto first got here, but he never saw him on the practice field. And so he said, basically, I wasn't here when Jay was here. And he said, he told the group, he said, I keep hearing a lot about this guy that's not here. I want to hear about the guys that are here. So you guys need to step up and make plays. And I think he's put the onus on them. And I think they've done a really good job of becoming, an elite group for USC right now. They're playing as a unit. They're playing probably the best of any unit on the team right now. So you got to give a lot of credit to Vic So'oto. And a lot of times it takes, putting it on the players and giving them that responsibility and saying, hey, we need you to do something. This is your group. Take responsibility for your group and become a unique unit and create your own identity. And that's what that group has done so far.
Mm-hmm. Now, Keary Colbert, he was asked about USC's younger wide receivers, specifically Bru McCoy and Gary Bryant. What do you have to say so far about how they've been playing?
Well, he was very complimentary of Bru McCoy and talked about how he's a guy that has worked his way into the rotation as well. And it's very similar of how, when Keary Colbert came up, he said that he was a guy that came up with the Carolina Panthers, and as a rookie, he had Musa Muhammad and Steve Smith and some of these older guys, Ricky Prohl, and they took him under his wing and said, this is the way you got to do things. And he's received that, Bru McCoy and Gary Bryant, Joshua Jackson, from the older receivers that are on USC's roster right now, the Amon-Ra St. Browns, even Michael Pittman, a guy that's worked with them in the past, with Bru McCoy and stuff. You can see what those guys have meant to this group now. And, he's just been very excited about how Keary Colbert is, about how those young guys are growing. He said Bru McCoy is growing every day. He works hard every day, and that's how you earn extra reps, and that's what he's done so far. And Gary Bryant's a guy that, was nicked up in camp, and Keary was very complimentary of the fact that he's throwing his body around there and making some blocks and things, and his time will eventually come, is basically what it said. That he's got to do the small things. Sometimes there's things that don't show up in the box score. They'll show up as a reception, but show up in the film room, and those are the type of things he's seeing from those young guys. So he's got high expectations for them going forward.
We've talked a lot about how defenses in defending this offense will just sit in zone coverage instead of playing USC's wide receivers straight up in man coverage. And Keary Colbert was asked, is that frustrating? Is that frustrating for your wide receivers? What do you have to say to that?
He didn't admit it. Every wide receiver is going to be disappointed when their defense is just completely backing up. You can't get the long ball. You can't really stretch the field that way. So he didn't say that. I know that they're thinking that as a former wide receiver. I know that's what's on their mind. But he said at the end of the day, we got to take what the defenses give us. And if that's the short pass and, maybe we'll try to break a tackle and create some run after catch type of thing. He said their mindset is to score TDs as an offense. And he said they start with the group and then their goals work their way down from there. So you start with the team goals of winning, and then you start with the offensive goals, then you go to the receiver goals, then you get down to your individual goals. So they're taking a team-first mindset, and if the receivers have to block while they run for 300 yards, then sure, they'll do that too. Obviously, they want to be catching touchdown passes. They want the big, splashy 75, 80-yard or 94-yard touchdown like Amon-Ra St. Brown had against Arizona State last year. But, if you have to take the short passes and catch them and build up those reception numbers, they'll take that too.
Mm-hmm. Now, like I said at the top, it was a different change of pace from yesterday's newsy COVID-19 related press conference. This was more focusing about football. We'll talk to Clay Helton on Thursday, get the latest updates. We don't have any updates on how testing goes. As far as we know right now, USC is still cleared to go to practice, their first practice of the week. A reminder that everything is pushed a day back later, so that's why they're starting practice on Wednesday. But talking, any other final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I thought it was interesting. I asked Vic So'oto about where does Jacob Lichtenstein fit in? He's opted back in. We expect him to be able to be at practice this week and kind of work his way back in. And they'll see, he said they'll see what his body is ready to do since they're jumping in the middle of the season. But he's excited that he's back and excited the potential he brings to the room. But he didn't know where he was going to line up. And I thought that was interesting. He said, we'll see. We got to kind of get him out there and kind of feel it out to see where exactly he is. And I think that's a positive for USC because that versatility that he brings could add even more depth to that defensive line. The defensive line is playing really well right now, but you don't want to have to overstress a guy like Marlon Tuipulotu and have him play too many snaps. So if you can add a guy like Jacob Lichtenstein to the mix, now that Brandon Peely's back, Caleb Tremblay should be back this week as well. That defensive line group is only looking like it's going up.
Yep. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for USC's Wednesday press conference. For Shotgun Spratling, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.